Welcome back to my channel, God's Hands on the Wheel of Time. I'm Sammy McKee, and this is part of my series on the Antichrist that influence the spring season of the age and how they impact the righteous republic. And in this episode, I want to talk about the second Antichrist. Now, piggybacking off of the first Antichrist, Napoleon and Alexander, what we see is that this new order in the old world, in Europe and Greece respectively, paves the way for this second Antichrist to come along. So right off the bat, we see the influences of each age on these figures. Hannibal, for example, just like Alexander, is this military general. He actually will fight on the front. At the Battle of Cannae, he did. He led his armies over the Alps. He embodies, again, those heroic aspects of the Age of Aries. The same thing can be seen with Hitler. Hitler, just like Napoleon, embodies those espionage propaganda aspects of the Age of Pisces. He is a propaganda machine in Germany. That's what gives his rise to power. Like Napoleon, he's not from the nobility. He rises up essentially from nothing to take power over his country. Whereas Alexander and Hannibal basically came from the royal bloodlines of Macedon and Carthage. They embody that in the Age of Aries. The Age of Pisces is more about these self-made men. And so what we see in terms of their careers correlating, also you have to view within this context, okay? Because Hannibal's invasion of Italy happens around the end of what would be 2,140 years before World War I ending. So this again kind of changes the script a little bit. But what we see is Hitler as a person began his military career and his impact on the world during World War I. And again, Germany's in World War I, just like Carthage is the enemy of Rome throughout the entire, career of Hannibal. The same thing can be said with Germany. Germany's the opponent of the United States throughout this whole time period of Hitler's life, which for Hitler begins in the trenches of World War I, around the same time that Hannibal becomes a commander in the Carthaginian army following his brother's death. And so both of their military careers start at the same time. But what we need to see in terms of history repeating is that as we go through this process, Hitler's rise through the ranks of Germany is political, right? It embodies those Piscean elements. He's not a military commander, he's a politician. He becomes chancellor and then eventually Führer of Germany. And that's a process that goes about through the 1920s. He gets locked in jail at one point before he comes out, and the Nazi party really rises to power afterwards in the 1930s. We see the same thing with Hannibal. Hannibal comes across, he's this underdog, starts this war with Rome, and then invades Italy and fights all these different battles one at a time that mirror Hitler's progression up the political ranks of Germany during the 1920s and 30s. Eventually, we get to the point where they have these fateful decisions leading to their undoing. And for Hannibal, this was the decision not to actually attack Rome directly, not to make peace with Rome, not to end the war, and basically to end up in this stalemate. Now, this stalemate has an impact on Rome. It actually causes huge economic devastation, a restructuring of society in Rome. That's part of the aspects of what the second Antichrist does to the Republic. Hitler as well, and it's more indirect through the Great Depression and the impact that has on the United States. But again, the way the United States responds to Hitler in World War II and also responds to the Great Depression reshapes American society, economy, and politics, and has the same impact on undoing the righteousness of the United States that we see with the Roman Republic dealing with Hannibal's scorched earth policies in Italy. But one of the things that happens is, just like Hannibal decides not to finish off this war, Hitler decides to start World War II. World War II was a terrible decision on Hitler's part. He could have honestly probably continued to annex territory the way he had in Austria and Czechoslovakia without outright war. He did not make peace with Britain after conquering France. That's another fateful decision similar to Hannibal not attacking Rome. And instead, he continues the war, and what does he do? He invades Russia, which basically is his undoing, and ending up, of course, at war with the United States due to the attack on Pearl Harbor, and Hitler declaring war on the United States, giving the United States the excuse to attack Hitler first, even before dealing with Japan. These are all fateful decisions that eventually leads to Hitler in a bunker committing suicide. The same thing can be said with Hannibal. Hannibal makes these decisions in his campaign. He's won all these battles and makes the decision not to actually go forth and, say, for example, maybe get Macedon more involved and go and attack Rome, or, make peace with Rome when Rome's on the ropes. And so these fateful decisions lead to their undoing. And what is it for Hannibal? That literally correlates with Hitler's suicide. It's his defeated Zama first, and then eventually Hannibal goes back to Carthage. He's trying to re-strengthen Carthage, and eventually, under Roman pressure, Carthage exiles Hannibal, ending his political career practically as to leave Carthage. That correlates exactly 2,140 years before Hitler's suicide. Now, this idea of Hitler, this mythos, there's gonna be all these changes in Europe that come about. The Cold War begins almost immediately. That's the same thing 2,140 years before that we see with the Roman Republic ending up face to face with the Seleucids, who, by the way, Hannibal fled to Antiochus the Great's court and is involved in this essential Cold War in the Eastern Mediterranean, and in Greece, between Rome and the Seleucid Empire. But all these things unfold together, and the impact that the second Antichrist has on the world is that it makes the Republican Empire. The United States, after defeating Hitler and after defeating Japan, end up becoming an empire in the Atlantic and the Pacific, right? They create these banana republics essentially in Japan, in Europe, that they dominate through NATO and these different alliance systems. The same thing can be seen with Rome. Now, it's in the Age of Aries, so it's direct conquest, right? They make, Carthage pay tribute. They annex all these provinces. They basically, make tributaries out of Greece. I'll talk about later on with the end of the Cold War correlating with the fall of Carthage and Corinth, and how that all parallels in Rome annexing this massive empire and America becoming a true unipolar empire on Earth. But what we see with the impact of the second Antichrist with Hitler and Hannibal's influences is that both Rome and America basically become these unwilling empires. They never really had been intending to expand beyond Italy and beyond America, but now their hands are forced into dealing with these wars that have been declared on them. Macedon declared war on Rome. Carthage declared war on Rome. Japan and Germany declared war on America. And you see, ideologically, Hitler is the polar opposite of what the Righteous Republic was in terms of, elected officials, right? He doesn't think that that's a proper government. He wants to be the Führer. He has this ideology, we call it fascism. The United States has been the antithesis of that. And the same thing can be seen with Hannibal. Hannibal's this almost like rogue general for Carthage that dominates the politics of Carthage through winning battles, right? Forcing the hands of their ruling oligarchy to act. That's the antithesis of the Roman idea that with their republic, where the generals are supposed to be the consuls that are physically part of the government and have been elected to give in their military commands. So in both ages, we see these aspects of Aries in Rome's government, and with Hannibal being this antithesis of the goodness of what was Rome. And at the same time, we see that with Hitler. This is what Pisces' negative aspects are. When we look at the corruption that eventually devours the United States, it is this same sort of evil that eventually becomes the government of the empire later on, right? So for Rome, this is really obvious. Caesar is like a Hannibal. He's a general that takes control outside of the realm of the elected government, and also embodies the negative aspects of Alexander as this living God figure and this hero that is the third Antichrist of the Age of Aries. If we look at the United States and the evil politics that are coming for the third Antichrist, will be an embodiment of the second Antichrist of the Age of Pisces, Hitler's fascist, National Socialist government that is ruling over the world, that also, by the way, taps into Napoleon's combination of religion and state, and being an emperor in the same way Caesar copies Alexander, and later emperors copy Alexander in that way. So I hope this gives you an idea of how both the first and the second Antichrist have paved the way for the Republic to become an empire, and not just in terms of like ruling over the world, but literally internally corrupting into becoming an imperial state, not a republic, not righteous anymore, but evil. And the Antichrist played this role, and the third Antichrist that I'm going to talk about in next episode is this same figure, but actually in the Republic, that ends the Republic and brings about the empire and the new age. And so I hope you tune into that final episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please like and subscribe. God's blessings to all. Thank you so much.